One time, Rod, my husband, down at Cocklebiddy, my brother had a army truck and it had a winch on the back of it, and we found this new cave, and it went down about 60 or 80 feet. You had to operate the winch from the front of the truck, and when I said to Rod, go steady, Bill to go steady, my brother, he put it in the wrong gear, and so Rod went zoom. The rocks knocked him out and broke a couple of vertebrae and his ankle and everything. So when he came to, he says, just tell him to pull me straight out. So we did. And then we tried to get onto the Flying Doctor. And I've delivered a baby once. His brother said, oh, she's having pains every... Rod and my husband and I were out mustering cattle. Bill, my brother, said, oh, Carol's having pains every 5 minutes. So the men got onto the Flying Doctor base to Lorraine and tried to order a plane, and we didn't have an airstrip at Mount Celia, so I got Carol in the car and drove her to Palfrey. And I've got all these old miners, prospectors, and I says, will you go and light fires along the airstrip for lights so the plane can land? And anyway, the baby came too quick before they could even do it. But there was only one house in Palfrey and old Mrs. Potts was there. So we raced up to her and she let us take Caroline on the kitchen table and delivered the baby.
Wow.
And old Mrs. Potts was running to the kitchen, boiling water and everything. Yeah, she was in a real flutter, but anyway, the baby came.
So when you started the station in 1965, did you have motorbikes and cars, or did you do a lot of work on horseback?
No, we didn't even have horses. We just used to have Holden utes. And,
yeah.
You know, no four-wheel drives or no motorbikes or anything in those days.
And no money.
And no money. That was right. Yeah.
And how far is your nearest neighbour?
80 k's to the west and 80 k's to the south. Yeah, so we can yell and scream at each other. Yes. When we were first married, Ron came out as the first manager on this Rawlinna Proprietors, which is just south of Rawlinna Props. It's the biggest sheep station in the world, it's shown. And he was their first manager, and so Rod loved poetry, and also the water driller that was there at the time, Peter Hogg. He was just fantastic with poems and songs and everything. And so Peter would be out in the camp and they, instead of leaving notes, they'd leave poems to each other. And Rod went around to see if he needed any food or water or what. And
yeah.
So they'd swap all these poems. And so he had a full suitcase of them when we got married. He was going to burn them, and I said no. So I put them together and ended up getting this book published. So it's really been over since 1978. You know, and I sold 20,000, or I would have sold about 30,000 now, I'd say. Railway carriage faces. Railway carriage faces peering blandly through the glass from air-conditioned comfort, Trans-Australian economy class. You can't help but be frustrated as your card game starts to wane and you turn your pent-up boredom out beyond the window pane. 1 minute you act as a connoisseur of the land that you behold, and you spin fantastic stories to a believing lounge car fold. And likewise first-class passengers as you sit and painfully stare, wondering how life exists on a plane so stark and bare. The railway carriage faces you just do not understand. The Nullarbor you gaze on ranks high as pastoral land, and beyond your line of vision sheep and cattle quietly graze in a land of full and plenty, living out their days. And you wouldn't understand the men who live and love out there. Their values are much higher than you who sit and stare. For what he has it's worth for, and well he knows it's worth. Not for him your armchair wit, for he's tempered by the earth. O railway carriage faces lies the world full of the likes of thee, passing judgment on looking out, but in seeing cannot see. So take your city lifestyle and the comforts all to hand, but in doing so consider that it all stems from the land.
Family used to travel around Australia following the Carney
Carney
line
shows,
for the
yeah.
Cockability Tavern.
Yeah, and started the Cockability, and that's where I met Rod, because he was managing up at Robina, just about 90 k's north of Cockability. And so, you know, he'd come down and court me and take me up to dances at Robina and whatever. And yeah, we ended up getting married, but him and his brother Graham put in and applied for, there was 3 blocks of land thrown open. Rodney Graham just was young and fit and no money, and they said when they got out they'd go to the pub and get drunk. But they ended up getting the middle block. So he gave up his manager's job and he went fencing. And so when we got married, that's how we started our life. Would have done over 1,000 k's of fence on the Nullarbor. And my job was to run the wire and thread it through, and nowadays you just can sideline the wire and just hook it on to the droppers, but in those days you had to do 5 wires and thread it through a hole and walk. You had to continually walk smoothly, and otherwise if you did, the wire would get a kink in it. So, yeah, and it'd break. You know. And sometimes you'd have to walk over a rabbit burrow and there'd be snakes in it and things like that, and what do you do?
Yeah, what kind of snakes do you get out there?
Mainly dugongs and decators down towards close to the coast. Robert and my son, they started the first water bores up at Junjunjara, so they were able to make Junjunjara into a community. But Rod and Greg got the first water there for them, and so I'd go up there and help them too. And coming back one time, I said to Rod, stop. And he said, why? And I said, there's a rock out there. And he said, there's 100 million rocks out there. And I said, this is different. But I picked up this about, I think it was 2.5 kilos. And it was just looked a rock as if it was dipped in tar. No, we sold it on the sly and went over to Canada and Alaska for about 2 months. I don't know, it would have been about 10 or 15,000 we got. Rod and his brother Graham started off Kaibo, and they wanted something short and easy to spell. And their father had been a captain in the English Army over in Africa during the war, and they used to have on the toilets posters saying KYBO. And so Rod said to Graham, Graham says, oh, let's call it that. And Rod said to Graham, you know, what does it mean? And he said, it's keep your bowels open, and that's what they had. Oh, I've always collected, you know, I've got diaries, too many wardrobes and cupboards full of diaries. I ordinate it more because
so
it's a
what
mess.
kind of things does the museum have in it?
For history of different people, and you know, starting off in the early days down with the one chap I've got, actually it's Julian Grill's grandfather. He was called the Boring Inspector Grill, and he was sent out to pick the waters and the dam sites where it'd be with drilling close. And he established, there's a artesian water, which is not now, but it's the only one on the Nullarbor down at Majura, below the escarpment. He found that one, and he also discovered and made the road going up the Majura Pass. Then I've got another book, a tape it was, which I've made it into a book, and this fella, he was a lay church member, and he travelled out when they were doing the railway line, pegging the railway line for the trans line, anything like that.
Jill, what was the story about out at Edgedina, I think it was, where gold nuggets were put down the post holes?
Oh, yeah, actually, my nieces had up against him, was half-caste fellow, and he was telling me about his mother. She grew up at Edgedina, and in those early days, they'd be looking for gold. The prospectors would be coming out too, but they'd get all the gold And they didn't know what to do with it, and they were building fences at the time, so they put all the gold nuggets that they found down the bottom of the fence posts. We'll have to go and dig up all these fence posts. Yeah, no, I've had an interesting life, I wouldn't swap it. You see people live in town and they just live in the same place, do the same thing.